Even though presidential candidates are no longer shaking hands and kissing babies, the race for the White House hasn't stopped. Trump campaign is now reaching voters online.
The campaign, like its leader, President Trump, has one gear, and that is forward.
Hey everybody.
Buenas noches.
Hello and welcome.
Hi everyone. We have the best data in the country. We have the best infrastructure laid out. And so now we get to capitalize on that data, on this infrastructure, to take our events online to the American public.
You might not see anyone going door to door. Those same volunteers are now making campaign calls from home.
While President Trump is focused on the health and safety of the American people, we here at the campaign are committed to defeating the Democrats, and how all of you at home can help us and join in this fight.
Its online campaign reached more than 1 million viewers.
It really is new age campaigning.
Just let's realize how good Donald Trump's political operation is.
The Trump Organization has a well-documented, robust online infrastructure. You know, what they call their Trump Army.
Tonight, I am honored to launch Catholics for Trump Coalition.
And welcome to our very first Black Voices for Trump online broadcast.
How can women stay engaged and informed?
I could have not felt more proud about this country.
President Trump has done about everything that you can do.
The Biden's record on notable job-killing trade deals.
I'm supporting NAFTA.
We're so fortunate to have a wartime president to lead us through this global challenge.
And we're going to get through it.
And we are going to keep America great.
Hey everybody, good evening and welcome to Team Trump Online. I'm Lara Trump, Senior Advisor to President Trump's re-election campaign. We have got a great show for you this evening. Joining us, we have Matt Schlapp, Chairman of the American Conservative Union, former Acting U.S. Attorney General. Welcome to the Mats, guys. Thanks for being here.
Great to be with you.
Great to be with you.
All right, so today we're going to discuss Joe Biden's many policy failures and how he simply cannot hope to compete with President Trump's clear record of promises made and promises kept. So I want to get both of you to opine on a couple of items. Matt Schlapp, we'll start with you. What role has China and their government's misinformation played in spreading the coronavirus?
Well, you know, what's interesting, Laura, is we've been having this whole question about whether or not America should embrace socialism. And this terrible episode of Chinese corona gives us a real live tragedy about what happens with communism. Here you have the world's leading communist country on the globe, the communist government in China, that is so secretive and so manipulative that they have this outbreak of the Chinese corona, and they don't tell the world what's actually happening until it's too late, until many people have died. In America, so many of us are still kind of like holed up in our houses because of it. And where are all the innovations coming from, Laura? Where are all the solutions coming from? They're coming from a free and open society, namely America, under the leadership of President Trump. So I think we have a tragic real world example as to why socialism, communism, centralized states don't really solve problems for people. They actually harm people.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Matt Whitaker, let me ask you the same question. What do you think about China's role in the coronavirus, the misinformation? What are your thoughts?
Well, remember that this probably started in China late November or December. The Chinese really never acknowledged till at least the middle of January that this was both a highly infectious virus and it was transmitting person to person. And the world, including the United States, lost valuable time in preparing and reacting to this. And really, the most disappointing thing is the Chinese have continued their misinformation. We're not clear as to the origins of this, whether it came from a lab in Wuhan that some have suggested that was studying coronaviruses, or whether it came from a wet market in Wuhan. Either way, Laura, the real concern I have is that while the president has been doing all he can to combat this, to make sure the United States responds to this as best we can, and as we only the United States can do. We still don't know and have the necessary information from China. And it's, you can see just the way the whole world has been infected by this virus, that the Chinese are still not telling the truth.
Yeah. And what does this say, Whitaker, I'll stay with you. What hard lessons should the United States take from China's role in the coronavirus outbreak? What do we do going forward?
Well, one hard lesson, and this is something that I've written and spoken about, is the Chinese can't be trusted. They can't be trusted as a trading partner. They can't be trusted as a first world country that's going to behave like every other civilized country in the world. And fundamentally, we need to reevaluate the participation of China in all of the organizations that the United States participates at. And this president has, and one of the reasons that I've supported him, and one of the reasons I think the American people elected him and will elect him again, is because of his stance on China. He understands what they do, what they're about, and he is not going to trust them either. It's the classic saying, trust but verify, that we, have had to go to many times in our nation's history. And, the Chinese have always tried to take advantage of the United States for their interests, and this president is looking out for the American interests.
It's interesting you bring up some good points there, because this president has been talking about China and calling them out on all the wrongs that they've kind of been doing for so long. No one has brought it up. No one has talked about it. No one's done anything about it. One of the things, Matt Schlapp, that President Trump has been saying forever is that we need to make products here in America. Right. Do you think we're going to see that pick up, that gain steam after we win this war against coronavirus? You think people are paying attention to that now?
Oh, absolutely. What's interesting about President Trump, and this, Lara, more than anyone, which is he's been echoing these themes for years and for decades. I remember talking to him before he even announced for the presidency, and he was talking about some of the problems with America embracing all of the fanaticism of some of the extremes of a globalized economy. You can still have a good, healthy respect for different countries and have a supply chain and have trade agreements. That's fine. President Trump has owned businesses around the globe. But what you don't want to do is make your people in your own country vulnerable because you've followed some of the most ridiculous aspects of globalism. And for instance, when we're not making our own bullets or our own munitions for the military in America, that's a big problem. When we can't get life-saving medicines and change the production schedules because our supply line is based on what the Chinese communist government does, or other, quite frankly, other regions of the globe that might not have our best interests at stake. That's a big problem. Look, America has got to be engaged in the world. America is going to lead this world in so many ways, including economically. But we have to make sure that from a national security perspective, we can always take care of our own people. It took Donald Trump coming in with basically a 2x4 into Washington, D.C., into the swamp, and to change the thinking on these most fundamental questions. And I think most Americans are appreciative.
I agree with you 100%. I think people are finally seeing all of the things that President Trump has done, has put into place. They have helped so far, and all the things he's talked about really we're feeling the full weight of right now. All right, everybody, stay right where you are. We're going to take a quick commercial break, and we will be right back.
Ready to go?
This is a crisis.
This is no time for Donald Trump's record of hysterical xenophobia.
Biden's son inked a $1 billion deal with a subsidiary of the Bank of China.
China is going to eat our lunch? Come on, man. They're not bad folks.
Since the outbreak, the Communist Party has been mobilizing overseas organizations to buy local supplies and send them to China.
It is in our self-interest that China continue to prosper. What a beautiful history we wrote together. Banning all travel will not stop it.
The president is right. That travel restriction on China, as every public health official we've talked to said, bought the country time.
That was a very smart move right there.
Hysterical xenophobia. Dear mine. Xenophobia. I complimented him on dealing with China. I'm not going nuts.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Matt Whitaker, I want to talk to you for a moment. Newly uncovered business records show that Hunter Biden is still listed as a board member of the Chinese company that he pledged to resign from back in October. This pledge received, of course, widespread media coverage, and former Vice President Biden lauded Hunter's move as a sign of his integrity. So how does this new revelation shed light on Joe Biden's pro-China bias?
Well, I think it tells us a lot about the Bidens and their relationship with China and what we can expect as a pro-China candidate that Joe Biden is. I mean, Hunter Biden was introduced to the president of this company, still as a 10% stakeholder in December of 2013, while Vice President Biden was on a trip with Hunter Biden in China. And the relationship blossomed from there. Like I said, Hunter owns 10% of this firm and is still, by Chinese business records, is still on the board of directors, even though he said that he was going to step down. And it was praised by Joe Biden as a great example of his integrity. I mean, I think some of these things are really unbelievable. And again, if the shoe was on the other foot, that the media would be apoplectic, even in the middle of this pandemic, about sort of how, somebody on our side, somebody on the Trump team didn't live up to what they said. But, the left and their complicit media never seem to hold them accountable. Hunter Biden needs to live up to his promise of not only getting on this board, but he needs to de-invest, sell his stake in this company, because it's inappropriate for him to own 10% of a $2 billion company. And I just think it just demonstrates kind of ultimately what their integrity and character is all about. And it's all about the Bidens.
Yeah, and you're right. The media covers up for them. To your point, could you imagine if this were my husband, Eric, or Don Jr., that even had the faintest hint of anything close to this? The media would be in meltdown, in hysteria. Nobody would be able to sleep because they would be covering this 24/7. But to your point, they're, totally ignoring it, not holding Hunter accountable here. So, Matt Whitaker, I'm going to stay with you. The World Health Organization, we know President Trump recently stopped funding because he says that is an organization that is beholden to China. What do you think about his move to do that?
I think it was appropriate and necessary. The World Health Organization appears to have placed at the top of the organization someone that is very comfortable with China. It's an Ethiopian gentleman that has had long relationships with China. Our funding it's the largest funding stream the WHO has, and at the same time, the WHO didn't serve its fundamental and primary purpose, which is to share information about these types of global pandemics. And so, even in the middle of January, if you think about what they did, is they said this is not transmittable person to person. In the middle of January, when China knew they had a problem and it was transmittable between people. And the other thing the World Health Organization did is when the president rightly and appropriately put in the China travel ban, which really saved, it could have been thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of American lives, the WHO complained. And now that we've taken away the funding and are investigating all of the WHO's involvement and misinformation, the Chinese are now critical of the United States for withholding that funding. So you can see that the WHO and the Chinese are hand in glove in this, and this is a time where we need more information, not less, from the Chinese and the WHO.
Yeah. And Matt Whitaker, we had just kind of talked about, and I think you brought up that the reality is so many of the things that President Trump had talked about before, had put in place, really, it's all kind of come to fruition right now. We're seeing why it's so important, for example, to have secure borders, not just so that we don't have an influx of illegal immigrants coming into our country, but when we have a pandemic situation, you need to know that you have secure borders, that you can control people coming into your country. But the phase one trade agreement with China, how does that address decades of China taking advantage of our country? Why is that so important?
Well, the China one phase trade deal, the first phase of the China trade deal, is so important, especially for a place where I came from, which is Iowa, and a place where actually Schlapp comes from in Kansas, which is the farmers who were, continuing to do their part in feeding the world, were unfairly targeted by the Chinese, and the president was able to negotiate in the first phase relief for them. In addition, the Chinese continue to pay a tariff on $250 billion of imports that come into the United States until we can get the entire trade deal. And, it demonstrates, whether it's the steel industry, whether it's the automobile industry, there's so many industries that have been not only targeted by the Chinese, but also really unfairly competed against by the Chinese. And in the middle of this pandemic, we also have now realized that a lot of our PPE, our personal protective equipment, and 80% of our medicines are coming out of China or out of this country. And so these policies that the president has put in place really have addressed some of these challenges that the Obama-Biden administration created by offshoring a lot of this manufacturing. The terrible NAFTA trade agreement is another example, not related to China, but related to sort of how other countries, especially Mexico manufacturers, took advantage of trade agreements. And the president, by doing the USMCA, has not only helped American manufacturing, but also American farmers. And this president's trade policies finally are resetting some of these terrible deals that previous administrations have put in place.
So it looks like we have our official nominee on the Democrat side for President, Joe Biden. We know that old Joe has a history of choosing China over the United States, though. So Matt Whitaker, what do you think would happen if Joe Biden were elected president? How would that change our relationship with China? Do you think that that's something China might like?
Absolutely. We would go back to the Obama-Biden policies, which for 8 years, the president says, and he's right, that the Chinese were eating our lunch. They were taking advantage of what they can do, and that is manufacture things at a lower cost sometimes than we can here in the United States. And these global corporations decided that China was the place to manufacture. And the Obama-Biden administration did not protect the American worker. And that's, you look at who's essential now. Who are the essential workers? It is the truck drivers. It is the restaurant workers. It are the hospital workers. It are the people that are the backbone of America. And quite frankly, the people that support Donald Trump and knew what he was going to be able to do for them. And so it's, I am heartened by the idea of another 4 years of Donald Trump, because I think we'll be able to permanently keep some of these advancements, especially as it relates to our relationship with China. And if Joe Biden is elected, we would go right back to what we had for 8 years, which was a stagnant Obama-Biden economy where unemployment hovered around 6, 7, 8%. And it took this president to get elected to turn the economy around just like a rocket fuel for this economy. And he's done it once, and he'll do it again once we get through this pandemic. And so I'm excited about another 4 years of Donald Trump.
I think you and everybody else are excited. But hey, listen, if Joe Biden ended up being president, maybe Hunter could get an even better situation going on in China. Maybe he'd make a little more money there. Who knows? Matt Whitaker, last question for you. When you were serving as acting attorney general, what was your main concern regarding China?
So we spent a lot of time, and in fact, I announced the indictment against the CFO of Huawei, among other things. And one of the key focuses that I was, as it related to China, was their stealing and illegally taking of U.S. intellectual property. And, we continue to see this advance under Bill Barr. They have announced an initiative among all 93 U.S. attorneys where they're looking for these theft of trade secrets and of intellectual property from American companies and American universities by the Chinese. It is part of their policy to compete against the United States is to take our stuff. And you can look at so many examples. We prosecuted many while I was at DOJ, but there are many, many more. And this is something that was very important in an area that I worked very hard on.
All right, everybody, stay right with us. We're going to take one more quick commercial break, and we will be right back with you.
President Trump cruises to victory with a record-breaking Republican turnout.
Trump got more total votes than Obama got as an incumbent.
Republican turnout operation in Texas is extraordinary.
Complete domination.
Receiving more primary votes than any sitting president.
We're winning. We're winning all over.
We had record turnout for an incumbent president.
The Republican Party has never been unified like it is now.
Turnout was also huge for Donald
Trump. President Trump celebrating a record-breaking victory.
It's not even a party, it's a movement.
more than President Obama had by a wide margin.
Let's realize how good Donald Trump's political operation is.
To all Americans tonight, I'm with you, the American people. I am with you. I will fight for you, and I will win for you. And we are going to keep America great.
All right, welcome back, everybody. So, Matt Schlapp, let me turn to you. CNN apparently is publishing propaganda from the Chinese military. Now, I don't think that shocks anybody that it came from CNN, but what does this say about the state of our mainstream media that once reputable outlets are now carrying the water of the Chinese Communist Party because they're so desperate to attack this president?
Yeah, and also tells you the pervasive effects of some of the worst aspects of globalism, which is sometimes these international media conglomerates, aren't holding the leaders of the Chinese Communist government to account for their failings. And, CNN specifically, when you travel overseas, that's where 90% of the news about America is coming from, through that channel. And if Laura, in past moments of crisis, I often found myself turning on CNN because there was a time when CNN just gave you the straight news. It wasn't skewed left, it wasn't skewed right. You could probably a little skewed left, but you could get the straight news. That CNN is resting in peace. It's gone. It's not coming back. And I think it's a real tragedy because you know what the American people want now? They just want to know what's going on. They want to know how to keep their kids safe. They want to know that they're not doing anything that's makes people sick. That's why the president's briefings are getting so many eyeballs. That's why the news coming on social media from new organizations, including the organization I run, that's why they're getting so many eyeballs, because people are searching for the truth, because most Americans are just simply fair-minded.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I do remember the time that you're talking about where CNN, you could turn to them and you would say, you know what, you can get the information you need here. Sadly, not anymore. All right, I want to turn to Joe Biden for a second, because Joe Biden oversaw the worst post-recession economic recovery in history, Matt Schlapp. So why does he think that he can compete with President Trump on economic revitalization?
And you know what's amazing is the president's going to have to play a constructive role in rebuilding this economy all over again. He had to do it when he took over from Obama, Biden. And let's remember what the administration of Obama and Biden brought us. First of all, it brought us terrible ethics, where Hunter Biden was allowed to travel around the globe on Air Force Two, and during those trips inked some pretty amazingly extravagant financial deals that he was self-dealing for his own interest. But what happened while Hunter was getting rich? The forgotten man and woman, there was hundreds of thousands of manufacturing jobs which we shed. One of the reasons we shed them was stupid trade deals, but another reason we shed them is because people like Obama and Biden wanted to end or make it almost impossible to have domestic energy production, to have fracking, which they want to make illegal. They wanted to shut down coal plants because they considered coal dirty, even though for most Americans, using coal meant being able to turn on their light switch and heat and cool their home. They wanted to make healthcare more expensive. Another big cost for employers is providing health insurance for their employees. They did everything they could to increase those costs on American businesses. And when you make costs higher for American businesses, they have no choice but to shed employees and to maybe even move overseas. And we saw record numbers of American corporations moving their headquarters out of America. That is the Joe Biden legacy. That is what he's going to hit the campaign trail if he ever leaves Hunter Biden's former rec room, where he's doing these rather strange online performances. That's what he's going to have to sell the American people. And the people I hang out with, they remember those days, and they don't want to go back to them.
Yeah, and Matt Schlapp, Joe Biden, though, has also been on the wrong side of trade throughout his entire career, from NAFTA to TPP. He's championed trade policies that destroyed manufacturing, shifted jobs overseas, as you just said. As we know, President Trump removed the U.S. from TPP and championed USMCA, which has thankfully modernized our trade relationships with our biggest trading partners, Canada and Mexico. So what sort of damage will Joe Biden do if allowed to renegotiate trade deals for the United States?
Well, the first thing is Joe Biden won't renegotiate trade deals because they're hard to do. And it took President Trump to come in and say, actually, we're going to do with NAFTA what the people who even first negotiated NAFTA said, which is we got to finish the negotiations and it should only last for a temporary period of time. You know, after 20, 25 years, you got to scrap these deals and start over. It takes a very unique president. We haven't seen another president do that. Literally scrap these global trade deals and say, we got to start over because the entire world attacks you for it. They say, oh, the most horrible things are going to happen. Look what's happened with China. China is going to buy more U.S. goods because Donald Trump stood up and said, I'm not following the old rules. I'm not going to dance to the old song. And what has Joe Biden done while Donald Trump has stood up and said, we're going to renegotiate these deals? Joe Biden has said China is not an economic threat. It is not a military enemy, that we don't have a problem when it comes to what China is doing on the global scene. I think this is a perfect juxtaposition between Trump's careful, responsible wariness towards an aggressive China and Joe Biden's approach to China, which is that, hey, if Hunter can get a few deals out of this thing, I'm fine with you guys doing whatever you want.
Yep. Joe Biden, Matt Schlapp, likes to tout himself as a moderate. We know that's not true because Joe Biden has pushed for the economically disastrous Green New Deal, which would kill hundreds of thousands of energy jobs and wreak havoc on states like Pennsylvania, which he claims as his home state. President Trump, on the other hand, just this week secured a deal with OPEC to save millions of jobs threatened by the energy war between Saudi Arabia and Russia. So, Matt Schlapp, tell us, who is the candidate that will fight for America's energy independence and workers?
Well, I think first, when it comes to this deal that OPEC has come to Saudi Arabia, Russia, in this global conflict over devaluing the price of oil, once again, it took a very special president to step up and say to these global partners, hey, enough's enough, knock it off. And look, I think generally we have this, as we go into the next phase here of our relationship with China, I think it's awfully important that the American voters, the American people ask themselves, do we want to be in a hot war with China? I think we'd all say no. But do we want China to fear America and to know they can't get away with their past malfeasance? And who's going to be tougher to make sure that happens? Is that Donald Trump, who is unafraid to take on anybody he needs to? Or is that Joe Biden, who seems like he needs some smelling salts to get back into the fight? I think the answer is going to be pretty clear.
Yeah, I totally agree. Listen, I think we're seeing very clearly why we have the best person in the White House possible for a time like this right now. We see it every day. Just because we are in the midst of a crisis, a pandemic right now, that doesn't mean the president hasn't stopped paying attention on all fronts. So Matt Schlapp, Matt Whitaker, thank you both so much for being with me today. Appreciate you guys being here. And thank you so much to all of you out there for joining us this evening. While we all stay safe and healthy following the president's social distancing guidelines, there are still so many ways to get involved to help us fight for 4 more years of President Donald J. Trump. Stay in contact with us. Please text Trump to 88022, or if you or your friends, family, or neighbors want to be involved in our fight to re-elect President Donald Trump, please visit armyfortrump.com and sign up. There are tons of ways to get involved while following the president's social distancing guidelines. You can attend digital TVLI trainings, host virtual MAGA meetups, and phone bank. Another great way to get involved is by joining the Trump Victory Finance Committee, a nationwide network of volunteers, fundraisers, or bundlers who play a crucial role in ensuring President Trump and the Republican Party's victory in November. Join our Trump Victory Finance Committee by visiting donaldjtrump.com/bundle or by texting bundle to 88022. As Finance Committee members progress in organizing donations, they will reach various fundraising goals and benchmarks that earn them membership status. And rewards include invitations to exciting events and special campaign briefings to keep all of our Trump bundlers in the know. So thank you again, everybody. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we will see you again soon for another edition of Team Trump Online.